Hi everyone and welcome back to another true crime video. Today's true crime video is another dark web episode 1, so this is part 2. This one was actually posted to Reddit by a username TAS Diablo, and this is the reason why I left the dark web. So as I usually say, I don't mean to disrespect anyone, I'm basically just shedding light on the information that I've done through my research, but this is a story, so I'm telling a story on behalf of somebody else. Let's get into today's video. So I'm going to be reading it in first person on behalf of this other person, so that's kind of why I'm like, I didn't actually specifically happen to me. So in order to give context to this video, let me just explain who I am. So I'm a 22-year-old male and I've just finished my masters at university. When I was about 12, I was finally given permission to start using my father's laptop. And since his work gave him one like every other year or so, he then passed down his old laptops to me. He thought that it was quite a good experience, that I was learning all these different things quite early on. When I got into high school, I got into a conversation with a group of stoners, and they were basically talking about accessing restricted parts of the internet which held a lot of people's information. I did quite a lot of digging and found myself stumbling across the dark web, finding proxy sites as well as hacks that you could use via command prompts to basically hide your IP address, therefore leading you to be able to walk through a lot of locked doors the normal internet restricts. I spent the best part of my late teens doing that sort of stuff, using a few forums like Rad.dot to talk to people who were basically using the same sort of stuff as me. I didn't have many friends offline, so yeah, online was more of the place for me, and I got pretty good at like blending in with the groups and the crowds. I had 3 different online names that I'd flick between, but only a close online friend of mine knew that all these 3 were actually me, and this was Nathan, and he was actually my close link to the dark web, since he somehow spent a lot more time than what I did on there. Even though only the other thing apart from ghosting him on there was literally playing Halo. What I liked about him was that neither of us mentioned our last names or any real information about us, even though we could have literally both looked it up at any given point. With that being said, I did actually trust Nathan a lot, and he knows a lot more about this story than what I'll be willing to admit on here. During uni I roomed with a local dealer who, unknown to the education board that expelled him, he actually worked for me. It was easy to order narcotics online like MDMA and ecstasy if you were looking in the right places. I also shipped them to the local PO box, the school's PO box, at random times, and this was without anyone being none the wiser. So I'd get the drugs online and then I'd ship them out, and then my real friend would use his connections to distribute them, since I didn't really have any of my own. I was in the second year of my biomed course when I started getting into the really stupid stuff. You do sort of see a lot of scumbags starting to share snuff videos and all that sort of stuff, so I kept well away from any of that. This was why I only started to use links that I found myself or ones that Nathan had actually provided for me. We would spend days, literally days, just sat looking through all the weird stuff that people were posting on there. But yeah, the government had shut down like quite a lot of sites, including Silk Road and Mad Onion, but they're the only ones that any sort of person would take notice on. Other hackers would message me on online forums and ask where they could get drugs and weed and stuff like that from, which was simple as pointing them in the right direction. The university had actually claimed to monitor people to stop them doing anything like this, but then again, they did absolutely nothing to stop it. By the 3rd year, I had made enough money to have a long screen setup of my own, which made decrypting sites' details a lot quicker for me. I had actually been delving into some messed up sites, and to be honest, I'd even been talking to people who were in charge of these different sites. You'd be surprised how normal a person in charge of a pornography website, child pornography website was. I did however get more curious though, which was stupid of me. After nearly 10 years of seamlessly delving into different things and roaming around the dark web, I joined Nathan as well as a few others in a chat room, basically sharing some quite messed up sites. This might sound weird however, but this is literally kind of an everyday thing to do while you're on there. Nathan and another friend of ours, we were all talking about a site that nobody had actually got into except one person. The rest of us are quite suspicious on like how he got into it himself, because the site he shared with us is arguably one of the most vile and disgusting websites we have ever seen. For those who are still listening to this video, this is basically why I'm posting about it. This site is within the deepest part of the dark web. The deepest part. And it has a scar that I bear to this day, and is one that I will never, ever forget. I'll warn listeners again, this is literally not for the faint-hearted at all. So if you are intrigued, still keep on watching the video. I won't be sharing the site URL or anything, giving it any publicity at all. I'm just going to be documenting on it. The only thing I will give is that people refer to it as Cold Body. The guy who managed to crack into the website actually gave me and Nathan the URL, but he was too giddy about getting into it himself that he forgot to give us the encrypted one, so we basically had to do all the work ourselves. We tried for hours and hours, and this was something that me and Nathan, who have spent the majority of our life on the dark web, had never come across code like this before. Nathan and I called it a night, so I left the command prompt open and went outside for a joint. Nathan remained on the chat so we could play Anvil. That's basically a Russian crack. That's basically a Russian crack of Halo for the PC. But when I got back, his microphone was actually muted for some unknown reason. For people like us who had nothing to hide from each other, we'd never muted our microphones at all. I waited a few minutes thinking that he was doing some personal things, and then he'll come back on. I didn't think anything of it, so I sat back down and started to look through the code again, thinking there was something I missed. There must have been something I missed, and I did. The code was completely different, completely uncrypted. I simply launched the URL, my computer whirled for a bit, until finally opening about 20 windows across my 2 monitors, all of them unscrambling code that I'd installed from the debuggers. Even though I had 32GB of RAM, my computer started making noises that I'd never actually heard before. Like, I then get ready to hard reset my monitors and then turn them back on one at a time. This is when I started to get a little bit paranoid, and I wish I committed and I'd turned them off. The windows were almost gone, and there were then 4, and then 2 of them were there, and then there were only 4 windows left. 2 of them were normal dark websites that the admin probably used to relay the IP addresses. The first site that I had seen do that, all of the text was dark red and extremely primitive for a site that I thought would be a little bit more impressive considering the security around it. The main center window only had a small amount of text on it, and that read, "If you have made it this far, you know what you're in for. If you still don't, you don't belong here." Even though I was feeling quite mellow, a text and a sheer awe of what I was getting myself into pierced me with fear. A simple yes, no prompt popped up. I accepted, ready for whatever awaited me on the next screen. A chat room window came to life on the second remaining window. I was wondering what it was for, perhaps another IP relay, or a shadow app that hid the true nature of the site behind it. It simply stated insert name, as well as an optional password, which I'm not 100% sure what that was actually for. The fact that people might actually have accounts to use this site, looking back at it, is really messed up. I used my most recent name, Diablo blah blah blah. A couple more scrolls of red text flew up the window, and then it opened up to a sort of chat room style thing like what you'd see on Omegle, except no ads, no colour, no nothing besides dark text. The chat was a bit more advanced than the first window, which was now frozen and wasn't responding to any commands. I have to say, finding this site at first seemed pretty cool, to be fair. I couldn't wait to tell Nathan that I'd actually got in. This was until the chat window popped up with names. One that I recognised was actually his, using one of his other usernames as well. I'd say about 3 dozen people were in the chat room. No names that I can actually remember though, and if I did, I wouldn't dare reveal any, especially not after this. I tried calling Nathan on his phone and obviously he wasn't picking up. It was stupid enough for us to delve deep into the dark web this far without even knowing what we've got ourselves in for. Users definitely had met before, you could tell, as they immediately started posting messages to the chat, and me and Nathan remained silent. As they casually started talking about stuff, I started to get a bit more calm and a little bit more relaxed. Maybe this was just a stupid exclusive cult website that basically talked about organised deals or things like that. It all seemed quite normal, so why that obscurity? The first window, still blank and unresponsive, suddenly began loading up. And it was like a sort of video file. A snuff video, perhaps? It would make sense to hide something like this, but not to the extent of this one. And the chat room didn't make too much sense. I felt tempted to ask the users of the chat room what the video was, but then was afraid that that might give up that we wasn't supposed to be there. Nathan hadn't said anything either, so I wasn't going to risk giving up the suspicions of other people. I then got the guts to ask, what are we all here for, trying to sound as eccentric and dim-witted as I could. I didn't actually get a response from them, which made it even weirder was nobody carried on talking from this point on. Nathan again remained silent, and I feel like I just presumed that that was because I'd said something and he just wanted to see what people would say. The video then stopped loading and finally began playing. Some more messages started rolling into the chat about the anticipation of the other users wanting to see it and like how excited and they can't wait for it, as footage of a dark grey basement then took over the screen. The resolution to start with was pretty awful, but then it started to render for about 30 seconds. Either way, I was scared. Like, I was nervous. Just like to add, nobody else was in the house, none of my roommates, it was just me in my room. So the basement area stays on the screen for about 4 to 5 minutes, and I spent every second looking at the screen to see if anything changed or if anything was happening. Finally, a dude steps onto the screen with a whiteboard holding up a sign with foreign letters as well as the words "cold body" written on it. The guy was ominous to look at, pretty overweight, and what could only be described as having like a motorbike beard. The man spoke. I had literally no idea what he was saying at first. He was speaking in, I think, Chinese or something. I've no idea. Luckily for Nathan and I, the man had someone else that was next to him who was basically talking as well, but it was quite broken English, so it was still quite difficult to make out. "Hello users, welcome to the Cold Body Show," I think is what he said. Honestly, I was more interested than scared at this point. This video looked like it could be worth showing other people. That thought never crossed my mind again. The man with broken English then bursts out into tears and starts sobbing out of literally nowhere. He sobs in front of the camera and then starts like wriggling about, and I can only guess which was in desperation or something. The man holding the sign yells at the guy in Chinese before another man enters the frame and puts a gun to his head. Before I could even realise that it was a gun, the gun was fired, pressing the gun against the dead man's temple once again and firing. Okay, so a shock video, not too much out of the ordinary for the dark web. That was when I stared at the chat window again. The users were actually talking about what they should do next. Most of the users were all talking in different languages, but there was almost some English in there, and the one that I read was "shoot him again." I realised at this point that I wasn't watching a shock video or a stupid snuff video that the admins had hid behind a wall of proxies. This was a live stream. I was watching a live stream of people be murdered right in front of me. I typed in the chat, "You sick fucks, what are you guys doing?" But the text weren't responded to because there were so many people spamming the chat. Another person, again, brought out in front of the camera, already sobbing at this point, and trying to break free from the ropes and chains that were around her hands and ankles. She was bare naked, covered in cuts and bruises. I didn't do anything but wait for the inevitable. The man shot her in the head and watched her limp body fall to the floor. People in the chat were cheering and asking for more. Someone picks up the camera and puts it in a different position now. It was more towards like a metal table, covered in, I think it was like a bin liner or something. The woman's body was then dragged by her hair and placed onto the table. But I have to give you a massive warning on this, and I am not kidding. This is literally the final warning. If you are not into anything like this, please do not watch the video because it is not nice. The body was slumped onto the table like you would if you was a surgeon operating on a body. Some more people wearing black and red ski masks went up to the body holding some sort of like kitchen knives, and there was a cordless drill as well. I couldn't watch without feeling physically sick. The men then began tearing her apart, limb by limb, stabbing her torso and cutting her open. I take another glance and I see that one of the men is actually having sexual intercourse with the corpse. I almost immediately retch and vomit all over my keyboard. My heart was beating like crazy. By the time the men were finished, there was literally a stump of a body that was left on the table. Her head was literally torn off and stuffed into her body cavity along with one of her arms. If it weren't for all the other weird sights that I'd seen before, I wouldn't have stayed this long on this one. 3 more people were brought into the screen, absolutely screaming for their lives, just literally trying to escape. One of them is shot in the leg. The other stands there shaking in place, trying not to scream again. The man holding the sign then walks up to the camera and stares right through it. It was as if he was literally staring right at me. He then says something else in a foreign language, probably the same as what he said before. When he stops speaking, the chat window does the same. Hardly a single other post. About 20 seconds after he'd stopped speaking and he was still staring into the camera, nothing happens. The chat then mentioned me and Nathan by our usernames. More of the chat then spam our usernames, taking over the whole window. As soon as they mentioned our names, I started completely freaking out. I tried to close the black window, but every time I do, it says application not responding. The live stream continues. The man staring at me through the camera then prompts me to say something. One of the first comments in proper English pops up. He's basically asking us which one we want to see killed first. I freeze for about 5 seconds before unplugging my computer from the wall. I didn't care about anything anymore, I just wanted to leave that site. I sat with a blank screen, then got up and started pacing up and down the kitchen, thinking what has actually gone on. I was too traumatised to even begin thinking about resting after the situation that has just happened. The thing is, I cannot report that to the police because I was actually in the chat. They can't do anything to stop this. Like, I spent the next 2 days talking and asking friends about what I should do. They all knew that I went on these weird and strange sites, but not to the extent of this that we'd seen. I then mustered up the courage to turn on my PC again, and I was relieved to see no viruses, and most of all, no black windows scattered across the desktop. I immediately go to check if Nathan has left any messages on Raddot. I had several messages from him as well as a few attachments in the second. I was hoping to talk to him about the whole ordeal, but the files immediately caught my attention. The attachments were pictures of me stolen from my Facebook and email, pictures of my school, university, and even my friends here. The messages after were my addresses, emails, online usernames, the 3 that I'd use between each of the different sites. My IP address was actually posted at the bottom as well. The last picture was actually me and an old girlfriend, and her IP address was actually on there as well. I was thinking, there's no way that they have tracked me down to this extent. I take a few minutes to basically compel myself and then reply, what has happened and who are you? I didn't get any response from them, and I still haven't to this day. He has all of my details, he knows all of my family, and I don't even know what else he knows. He could know so much more. I still don't know what happened since I left the live stream. I can only pray that this information doesn't fall into the hands of those insane, crazy and basically demonic people. I can't let them find me or those who I care about. I will never ever go back to that part of the internet again. It's not safe for me, you or anyone. The police can't find them, but they can find you. Don't try and find the site, and don't try and report the site. They will do to you what they did to me. And if you think they won't, just think, I thought I was invincible at this. Completely invincible, and look what happened. So yeah, that does bring us to the end of that story, and that was a really weird one. Really weird. Imagine somebody actually knowing all your information like that. I bet that the Diablo guy was traumatised, because you would. Imagine somebody sending pictures who you don't know about of you, your ex-girlfriends, your family, your IP addresses, their IP addresses, the school that you go to, the universities and everything. Like, imagine your information like that being out there. That's just no. And that's why I've never been on the dark web, never intend to, never want to. That's why I like watching videos like this, so you can hear about stories that go on that have happened to other people, so you basically don't have to. So yeah, I hope you did like that. So yeah, more videos weekly I will be doing. So this was like supposed to be like the 4th last week, but for last time. Sorry, I've been a little bit rubbish on uploads. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please do leave a like on the video, subscribe and turn on the notification bell as well to keep up to date with all my uploads. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.